Okay, now today we'll be discussing chapter 14, which is about family formation and parenting in same sex couples, legal matters. Now, within the legal matters of this part of chapter 14, which discusses same sex marriages and couples, excuse me, there are internationally 10 countries that have legalized same sex marriage over the past decade. There are a number of states that have enacted legislation sanctioning same sex marriages or marriage equality legislation. 29 states now have constitutional amendments, and an additional 11 states had statutes in place barring such marriages by 2011. There are a great number of states as well who don't grant same sex couples the opportunity to adopt jointly. Now, also, increasingly, people who identify themselves as a part of the LGBT community are adopting children, or they're finding a path toward parenthood through a number of um, avenues, including reproductive technologies, ovum and sperm donation, and surrogate mothers. Now, also in 2010, there was a act that was created, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Repeal Act of 2010, and this act was created in regards to individuals who may serve in the armed services, personnel, or persons who identify themselves as gay or lesbian. Then they can be truthful about their sexual identity. So this was created during that time frame. Historically, it is important to note that in 1973, the American Psychiatric Association also disclassified homosexuality as a mental disorder. So back then, at that time frame, they were viewing same sex. Anyone who was basically interested in same sex or homosexuality, it was considered a mental disorder by them. Now, there are also certain cultures that also stand against homosexuality as well, like some cultures as far as Judeo-Christian heritage. They label homosexuality at most negatively, homophobia and irrational fear, dislike, or discuss regarding homosexuality and homosexuals, and heterosexism, the belief that heterosexuality is superior and preferable to homosexuality, had a strong presence. So that is the way that the Judeo-Christian heritage is one example of how that religion, how they view homosexuality. The determinants of sexual orientation. The majority of the current research on sexual orientation seems to focus based on several complex interacting genetic, hormonal, and other biological factors that seem to underlie sexual orientation, and later environmental factors can add subtle layers to this complexity. Despite the ongoing investigations that are also remaining still with no answer to the etiology of sexual orientation, um, within the sections, within the determinants of sexual orientation, the first one is the biological perspective, basically viewing brain structure and genes. Um, this has been examined. The brains of homosexual people have been examined to determine whether there are any significant identifiers in terms of the structure. Researchers also did find that there are structural differences in the brain of men who are gay versus men who are heterosexual. Um, this was by Simon LeVay He basically researched and she compared the structure of the nucleus and the hypothalamus of the brain, and she found that there are structural differences within those men. Also, other researchers they also found just similar differences in the structure of the human brain that identify themselves as gay versus heterosexual. A later study was then by Hamer in 1993, and Hamer suggested that there could be a genetic link. Hamer and his colleagues observed that the male homosexuality within a family pedigree seemed to be more closely related to inheritance through the maternal line. And they also discovered epigenetics, which is likely also contribute to the genetics of homosexuality. And it's also the effect of the environment on the gene expression of that person. Now the next one is the hormonal influences in genes. Then the hormonal influences in genes. Um, Researchers also have failed to prove that the link between sexual orientation and sex and exposure to sex hormones have any type of link through testosterone and estrogen. The exposure to varying concentrations of sex hormones prenatally, particularly during certain critical windows, however, may contribute to gender identity and/or sexual orientation. Now, with the psychological perspective, this was historically and from a more psychological angle, the psychoanalytic view based on the works of Sigmund Freud, where he suggests that family influences may also play a significant role in sexual orientation. Other approaches propose that sexual orientation is also learned among males and females, which suggests that individuals can willfully choose as well as change their sexual orientation. Although learning is an important facet of adolescent and adult sexual behavior, learning theorists have not been able to conclusively point to a link between learned experiences and adult sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is also determined by several interacting factors that are increasingly being researched to gain greater understanding. Queer theory. Now, within queer theory, the word queer, this word has been used in many previous decades to refer to homosexuals. It was especially used back in like British English, while it's used in American speech and often viewed as a derogatory, simple, or overly artsy. The word has slipped back into the mainstream use in reference to the queer theory, and they refer to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer as the queer theory. This theory started back circulating in the 1990s to normalize the connotation of the concept of homosexuality by stating that it is not an opposite or another variant of homosexuality. Queer theory acknowledges a continuum in sexual identification and expression, implying that sexuality is more varied than denoted by one label. Okay, the next section, which is incidents. A large number of family systems in the United States today include a child who identifies him or herself as the LGBT community. Now, from historical sex research by Alfred Kinsey, more than half of a century ago, as well as more from recent research, it's estimated that individuals exclusively homosexual orientation make up about 7 to 12% of male population and 5 to 7% of female population. These individuals, assuming that these individuals come from In average size families, about four persons, the potential number of persons with a homosexual relative or close friend is nearly a third of the population of the United States. And also, in addition to that, 25% of gay and lesbian populations of the United States are biological parents to children from heterosexual relationships. They also may be upwards of 10 million children in the United States who may have a gay or a lesbian parent. There's also not a clear estimate of families who know they have a member, of the family that's of the LGBT community. Also, family systems with LGBT children. Most parents don't include an expectation that any of their children, will reveal an LGBT identity or orientation upon reaching puberty. Normally, when it's revealed by a child that he or she does identify themselves as a part of the LGBT community, it usually creates a crisis for the entire family system. One of the most difficult things by a person who is gay or lesbian is disclosing this information to others, especially family members. And this process is known as the coming out phase. It can add challenges for some youth who are part of the LGBT community to develop healthy, positive self esteem growing up in a heterosexual family. Family disruption basically relates to difficulties in reconciling their negative attitudes, beliefs, and myths about homosexuality is what they know about the particular family member. And the family members and friends also like to maintain positive image that they already have about the child as an individual and as a family member. The most important thing is for family members to just, understand that the importance of the child's disclosure and sexual orientation. The child's disclosure, it normally affects all family members to some degree, and it can be expected to be a severe stressor event for their family system. Disclosure as a family crisis. As a family crisis, a child's disclosure of his or her sexual orientation may act as a stressor event for the family system, which most likely produces a crisis reaction. According to Haynes and Hills 1964, the ABCX model, which will be on the next page, um, the model is of family crisis management and how the family systems demonstrate common ways of reacting when challenged by a significant stressor event. The model proposes that when A, which is a stressor event, interacts with B, the family's use of resources and their ability to cope with the stressor, and C, the family's definition of the stressor event, then a family crisis, which is X, will occur. So this is just a picture of the model and how the model operates as far as that information. Now the model can be found on, let's see, it was on a particular page. Well, the explanation of it, I thought it was a picture of the model, but yeah, it is on page 306 of the book. There's more in-depth information there about the model of the ABCX model, Hill's ABCX model of family stress. Okay, disclosure of a family crisis continued over to this page. It's increasingly people are more accepting of diversity, which includes sexual orientation. Several factors predict the nature and the strength of a family's determination to constructively deal with the child's disclosure. Okay, the more a family system subscribes to traditional conservative teachings about homosexuality, the more negative the reactions will be and interpretations of a child's disclosure. Also, on the other hand, family values, love, and respect all their family members and honor the diversity that may be expressed. Heterosexism is one thing that may occur during the disclosure as a family crisis, and it is the heterosexism is the pre the prejudicial belief that heterosexuality is superior to and preferable to homosexuality. The age and the gender of many family members can influence the reaction in a positive or negative ways, and more of the younger children and much older adults in the family system can be more accepting and react more, favorably to the disclosure than others. Members of the same sex as homosexual child can occasionally react more negatively than members of the opposite sex. When a family system determines that disclosure constitutes a family crisis, the systems move into a phase of disorganization and family function. Stressor event that they interpret as a crisis because the ultimate goal of the system is to maintain the established homeostasis or balance. Thus, this organization phase also begins to be resolved as a family system and moves into a recovery phase. Now, for family formation in same sex couples, as applied to family life, same sex couples have reinvented the notion of what it means to be a family and how the family functions and who participates in the family. These families are referred more to as a family of choice and represent a form of kinship formation. Many of these parents identify themselves as LGBT, do not feel the need to conform family structure based on consanguinity or a legal sanctioned marriage. The beginning of the LGBT kinship formation takes place when an individual initiates what is known as the coming out process. Like other families, those from those formed by persons who identify as LGBT bring strength as well as challenges to family members. Issues related to children of fathers who are gay. The father's disclosure of homosexual orientation. They may have a more difficult time disclosing their homosexuality to children than mothers do who are lesbian. This may be difficult among many African American men. And the fathers who are gay, they describe their reactions to they describe their children's reactions to disclosure as none or tolerant or accepting. Now, the age that the children are when the time of the disclosure may affect their reaction. Those who may have not experienced puberty may be more accepting of it than children who are not. These children also have some difficulty relating to their peers who are aware of their father's homosexual orientation, but children apparently they cope successfully with these problems with little harm to their self-esteem. The parenting skills and effectiveness, there are no empirical or descriptive evidence that proves that having been raised or living with a gay father is detrimental to the development of the children. And most fathers, they have more of a positive relationship with their children who are gay, and they make serious attempts to create stable home lives and positive relationships with their children. They also are heterosexual in the degree of involvement and intimacy with their children, and they tend to be more non traditional, more responsive to the children's needs, providing more explanation for rules than fathers who are heterosexual. Sexual orientation here is not a factor determining the quality of the parenting and the relationships and behavior. There are no basically valid scientifically derived data proving that children are harmed in any way by a father who is gay. Parent-child relations in same-sex couples. Some of the fathers may be their challengement to adjustment to identify issues of self acceptance by other men who are gay and matters related to specifically parenting and child custody issues. They may imply heterosexuality while gay is associated with homosexuality. Researchers also estimate that about 20 to 25% of self identified men who are gay are also fathers. With In the integrative sanctioning, it's when a man disclosure of his gay orientation and identify to non-gays as his father identifies to gays, forming close liaisons with persons to tolerate or accept their identities simultaneously. And it starts by distancing himself for those who are intolerant. Same sex families, there are a majority of them are most like single parent headed family households, so they resemble more of that. Okay, so fatherhood and men who are gay. Alternatively, more men who are gay are choosing parenthood because they like their heterosexual counterparts than sincerely desire to have their own children for many reasons. Um, the reason why a man who is gay becomes a parent, they, um, can't actually say a specific reason, but some of them may be. Um, One might speculate that a man might not be able to accept homosexuality orientation. Therefore, he may marry a woman and father's children as a means of denying his true sexual orientation. An increasing number of men who are gay are choosing parenthood because, like their heterosexual counterparts, they desire to have their own children for many reasons. And a man who is openly gay is willfully choosing to become a father as part of a liaison established between him and a woman who is lesbian because they both desire to become parents either through artificial insemination or surrogacy. Fathers who are gay, they are challenged in establishing a personal identity that integrates both notions of being gay and being a father at the same time. Most come to terms with their gay orientation years of trying to fit into a heterosexual lifetime and an image of fathering children. It's also not true that most of the fathers who are gay become married to hide their sexual orientation either. Okay, it's also been said that 20% of those men who enter into a marriage with a heterosexual woman, they normally frequently lead into parenthood. There's also no empirical evidence proving that homosexual orientation of fathers or caregivers is detrimental to the child's welfare. And the fathers who are gay, they are as effective as fathers who are heterosexual in their ability to parent and provide child care for the children. Fathers who are also gay may feel additional pressure to be proficient in things. They may feel like they need to be proficient in things, just they may feel guilty about the difficulties that the divorce and disclosure may create for those children, and they are sensitive to the fact that their parenting behavior is scrutinized by ex-wives and others, and they may feel that their custody and visitation rights may be challenged just because of their sexual orientation that they chose. These fathers also may be more gender equal than fathers who are heterosexual in their approach to parenting, and their child rearing styles may also incorporate a greater degree of expressiveness and nurturing behaviors. gender equal behavior. Um, Within general equal gender equal behavior, historically the work of Biam identified androgyny as the ideal gender role. Androgynous is basically individuals manifest characteristics associated with both genders, regardless of their biological sex. Researchers also have found that these couples in which one person or both support gender equality, they have higher levels of relationship satisfaction, they divide decision equally, de-emphasize the use of power by either partner in the relationship, and they also have greater long-term satisfaction that extends into years of late adulthood than couples who have traditional undifferentiated gender role orientation. Now, gender equal behaviors within fathers who are gay. These fathers support gender equality, as described, highly developed egos, showing greater flexibility in considering options and solving problems, and they have greater and deeper respect for individuals' differences in others. They also have an accepting attitude about sexual behavior, sexual relationships, and interpersonal relationships with others in general. Now, the mothers who are lesbian, mothers basically, they generally are similar to the fathers, but researchers observe differences in the family dynamics part. They differ from men who are engaged in which of how they become involved as parents. An example is how many women acknowledge their homosexual orientation after being married to a man and having children. Other lesbians, they use artificial insemination as a means of achieving parenthood. Now, mothers who are lesbian are usually full time parents because they have the custody of those children. Within the family formation may also occur more frequently among women who are lesbian than any men who are gay. These couples who are lesbian, they face many social and legal challenges, and they use artificial insemination to conceive children with a committed relationship. Most laws of the states recognize the biological mother's legal custody, which leaves the non biological social mother with no legal parent rights unless she legally adopts and conceives by her partner. There are also four there are family dynamics in family dynamics in same sex couples. Now, within the family dynamics, there are also four unique characteristics described by same sex family systems headed by lesbians because of their parental roles are more active than those of children of fathers who are gay. They may experience a lack of legitimacy because they are not recognized as a family unit by their community. The families must address their unique status, such as more frequent confrontation with stigmas associated with homosexuality. The families also can experience strained relationship with ex-spouses and other relatives, and also the division of labor and parental roles taken and unique assignments and situations. Children of mothers who are lesbian. These issues related to children of mothers who are lesbian, they're not they don't differ significantly from those of the fathers. No differences in general adjustment, the role identity, or cognitive or behavioral functioning are reported in studies comparing children of lesbian and non lesbian mothers. Self esteem of those children whose mothers are divorced and lesbian appear to be no different than those of mothers who are heterosexual and are divorced. There also are four principles that are relevant to children of mothers who are lesbian, dealing with the parents' disclosure of sexual orientation, with the uniqueness of having lesbian parents and the effect on the parent-child relationship, coping with custody return concerns, and dealing with the reaction of others. Now, with the mixed orientation marriage, diversity in a family forms is surfacing. In a mixed orientation marriage, sometimes referred to as heterogay relationships, are one of the spouses or partners identifies him or herself as heterosexual while the other one may be lesbian or gay. They basically raise the children together, and their sexualities may be expressed in ways that suit the individual's need of each partner. They may not share a common physical residence, and they may. These couples are not legally married. It just basically represents a variation of non marital families. They also capture characteristics of both traditional and non traditional families, and these researchers indicate that children of these families they appear to benefit more from family structure. They have a stable and predictable family environment with the father who is involved in their upbringing and shares financial support and have generally positive psychological and development function. So this wraps up the end of chapter 14. I hope you all have a great weekend. You all have a great day.